station appeared only after midnight. Not gradually, not with the distant vibration of approaching rails or the glow of headlights cutting through rain. One moment, the mountainside road remained empty beneath drifting fog, and the next, pale platform lights stood quietly among the cedar trees as though they had always been there. Rain fell softly across the narrow road. The man stopped walking. For several seconds he simply stared through the mist, trying to understand how an entire train station could exist where there had been nothing moments earlier. It was small. Only a single platform stretched beside darkened tracks disappearing into the forest. Old wooden beams supported a sloping roof blackened by age and moisture. Pale lanterns hung beneath the overhang, their dim glow softened further by rain drifting sideways through the mountain wind. No sign displayed the station's name. No sound came from within it. The surrounding forest remained completely still. Scales shifted from the empty mountain road beneath rain to the silent platform hidden among cedar trees to the faint sound of water dripping from his coat sleeves. He looked back down the road behind him. Nothing. Only winding darkness descending between trees and telephone poles. The bus should have arrived nearly an hour earlier. At first he had blamed the storm, then the dead phone's signal, then the mountains themselves. But now, standing before a station he did not remember passing on the route map earlier that evening, uncertainty settled quietly into him. Not fear, displacement. The rain intensified slightly. Cold water slid from his hair onto his collar as wind carried mist across the empty tracks. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a metal chain struck wood softly in the darkness before falling silent again. He stepped toward the platform. Wet gravel crunched beneath his shoes. The station lights flickered once overhead, not brightly, but weakly, as though electricity reached this place from very far away. A faded timetable hung beside one of the wooden pillars. Most of the ink had blurred beyond recognition from age and moisture. Entire rows of characters dissolved into gray stains across the paper. Only one line remained legible. 12:13, no destination beside it. No train name. Only the time. The platform clock above the bench ticked softly through the rain. 12:11. 2 minutes. He should have left. Even standing there, he understood that instinctively. Mountain stations did not appear from nowhere. Timetables did not list only a single arrival. And despite the rain, despite the darkness, despite the isolation of the mountains, the silence surrounding the platform felt unnatural in a way his body recognized long before thought could explain it. No insects, no distant traffic, no electrical hum. Even the rain seemed quieter near the tracks, yet exhaustion settled heavily inside him now. The long business trip, the missed connections, the endless hours traveling deeper into unfamiliar countryside, and beneath all of it, something older, a quiet fatigue that had followed him for months, the kind that sleep no longer fixed. He removed his soaked glasses briefly and wiped them against his sleeve. When he looked up again, someone was sitting at the far end of the platform. The man froze. An old woman sat beneath one of the dim lanterns near the tracks. He was certain the bench had been empty moments earlier. She wore a dark kimono beneath a pale rain cloak, her hands folded neatly atop a closed umbrella resting across her lap. Gray hair fell softly around a face lined not with age alone, but with an exhaustion so calm it barely resembled sadness anymore. She did not look at him. Her gaze remained fixed on the tracks disappearing into fog. Rain drifted through the platform lights between them. Scale shifted from the isolated station hidden within the mountains to the old woman waiting beneath dim lantern glow, to the slow rhythm of breath settling uneasily inside his chest. For several moments neither spoke. Then quietly, without turning toward him, she asked, "Did you miss the last bus as well?" Her voice sounded gentle, not startling, almost familiar. He swallowed before answering. "Yes." The old woman nodded once, as though confirming something already expected. The mountains become difficult after midnight. Again silence settled between them. The clock above the platform ticked softly onward. 12:12. Wind carried mist across the rails in pale drifting currents. Somewhere beyond the forested slopes below, water moved unseen through darkness. The man glanced again toward the empty tracks.
Does a train actually stop here? This time the old woman looked at him. Her eyes reflected the lantern light strangely, not brightly, but distantly, like light seen beneath deep water.
Yes, she said softly. Another pause followed.
Then, but not everyone should board it.
The statement remained suspended between them as rain continued falling across the station roof. Before he could respond, a vibration passed faintly through the tracks beneath his feet, very slight.
Almost imagined. The old woman lowered her gaze once more toward the rails disappearing into fog.
Far beyond the trees, somewhere within the mountains, a train whistle echoed softly through the rain, but the sound did not resemble modern trains.
It sounded older,
lonelier, as though arriving from very far away. The whistle faded slowly into the mountains.
Not abruptly. It lingered between the cedar-covered slopes as though the fog itself continued carrying fragments of the sound long after the train had stopped making it.
The rails beneath the platform trembled faintly. Rainwater gathered along the steel tracks in thin silver lines reflecting the dim station lanterns. Mist drifted low across the platform, swallowing the far end of the station almost entirely now. The old woman remained seated calmly beneath the lantern glow.
She did not look toward the approaching train.
Only the man watched the darkness beyond the tracks.
At first he saw nothing. Then gradually 2 pale lights emerged through the fog.
Not bright headlights.
Yellowed with age.
The train moved slowly out of the mountain mist without sound beyond the quiet grinding of wet steel.
No electrical hum accompanied it. No harsh breaking noise echoed through the station.
It simply arrived. Dark rainwater slid across its black exterior as it emerged fully beside the platform. The train looked older than anything still operating in rural Japan, its paint dulled by time, its windows framed by worn metal darkened with rust and moisture. Warm amber light glowed faintly behind fogged glass. Several windows revealed silhouettes inside, passengers, yet none of them moved.
Scale shifted.
From the train emerging silently through mountain fog to the rainwater sliding across darkened windows to the tightening stillness settling quietly inside his chest. The train stopped precisely beside the platform. The doors opened immediately.
No announcement followed.
No conductor appeared.
Only warm, dim light spilling softly onto wet concrete. For several moments neither he nor the old woman moved.
Rain continued tapping gently against the station roof overhead. Then the old woman stood.
Slowly, carefully.
Her umbrella remained closed in her hands. She stepped toward the open doors without hesitation. The man watched her in silence before finally speaking.
Where does it go?
She paused beside the entrance. For the first time, uncertainty crossed her expression faintly, not confusion, but the sadness of someone searching for the kindest version of an answer, farther than most people intend.
Then she boarded.
The doors remained open afterward.
Waiting. Wind pushed cold mist across the platform around his legs.
The station behind him felt impossibly distant now despite being only several steps away.
He should not have entered.
Some part of him understood this completely, but another part, quieter, more exhausted, felt strangely relieved at the thought of no longer standing alone in the rain waiting for something that might never come. The train lights flickered softly inside.
Without fully deciding to, he stepped forward.
The interior air felt warm, not comfortably warm.
Still,
like entering a room left untouched for many years.
The doors closed behind him without sound.
Immediately the station outside disappeared behind fogged glass.
He turned instinctively toward the nearest window. The condensation and drifting rain blurred the platform almost completely now.
Only faint lantern light remained visible through the mist. Then even that vanished. The train began moving, slowly at first.
The motion felt strangely smooth beneath his feet, almost floating rather than rolling along tracks.
He steadied himself lightly against one of the worn wooden seatbacks before looking farther into the carriage. About a dozen passengers sat scattered throughout the train. None spoke. Most stared quietly through the rain-covered windows. Others sat with lowered heads, hands folded neatly in their laps. Something about them felt subtly wrong.
Not frightening. Disconnected.
A middle-aged businessman still wore a loosened office tie, rain stains darkening one shoulder of his coat.
Across from him sat a young girl holding a paper pinwheel in perfectly still hands.
Farther down the carriage, an elderly couple sat beside one another without touching, both gazing silently toward the passing darkness outside.
No phones.
No conversation. No movement beyond breathing. The old woman from the station now sat near the center of the carriage beneath a dim overhead lamp.
She closed her eyes quietly as the train moved deeper into the mountains.
The man chose an empty seat near the rear window. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar dust and rainwater. Outside, the forest drifted past slowly through fog-covered glass. Telephone poles appeared occasionally beside the tracks before dissolving again into darkness. Dim crossing lights blinked somewhere far below the mountain roads. At first, everything seemed almost normal, only quieter than it should have been. Then he noticed something strange. The train tracks curved sharply around the mountainside, yet the motion inside the carriage never shifted accordingly. Cups resting beside passengers remained perfectly still. Hanging straps overhead barely moved at all. It felt less like traveling through mountains, and more like the world outside was sliding slowly around the train instead.
Scale narrowed, from the dark countryside passing beyond the windows to the unmoving silence inside the carriage to the faint pulse beginning quietly beneath his ribs. The overhead lights dimmed briefly.
For one moment, the windows reflected only the passengers themselves against black glass, and in that reflection everyone appeared slightly older.
Not dramatically.
Only tired.
The lights steadied again.
Outside, rain continued falling across endless cedar forests. The businessman several rows ahead suddenly spoke without lifting his eyes from the window.
"We're late tonight." No one answered him.
After several seconds, the young girl across the aisle replied softly. The fog was heavy near the tunnel. The businessman nodded once. Neither spoke again.
The exchange unsettled him more than silence had.
Not because of what was said, because both voices carried the strange calmness of people continuing a conversation already repeated many times before. The train moved onward through darkness.
Stations appeared occasionally beside the tracks, now small rural platforms lit by single lanterns or flickering fluorescent lights.
Yet the train never stopped. At each station, figures stood waiting beneath umbrellas or beneath empty roofs, their faces obscured by rain and mist. None reacted as the train passed.
They simply watched, motionless,
then vanished behind fog.
The man checked his phone again instinctively.
Still no signal.
But something else had changed. The time remained frozen.
12:13, the same time listed on the station timetable. The same moment the train arrived, the realization settled quietly into him. Outside, the mountains grew darker, and somewhere farther ahead along the tracks, beyond rain and forest and drifting mist, another whistle echoed softly through the nights. The train continued deeper into the mountains. Rain drifted steadily across the windows in silver currents, blurring the forests outside into layers of moving darkness.
Occasionally, distant lights appeared between the trees, isolated farmhouses or roadside lamps glowing faintly through fog before vanishing again behind cedar trunks and tunnel walls.
Inside the carriage, no one moved unnecessarily. The overhead lights hummed softly above worn wooden panels darkened by age. Water tapped gently against the roof in uneven rhythms while the train glided onward with impossible smoothness.
The man looked again at his phone.
12:13. Still frozen. No notifications. No signal.
No change. The battery percentage remained exactly where it had been several minutes earlier.
A quiet unease settled deeper inside him now. Not panic, the slow realization that ordinary explanations were beginning to fall away one by one.
Scale shifted from the endless mountains outside the train windows to the silent passengers beneath dim overhead lights to the unmoving numbers glowing faintly on his phone screen.
Farther down the carriage, the old woman remained perfectly still with her eyes closed.
The businessman near the front window loosened his tie slightly before returning his gaze toward the darkness outside. The elderly couple beside one another had not changed posture once since boarding. Only the young girl holding the paper pinwheel seemed awake in a different way. She watched the rain carefully, not idly, as though searching for something beyond the glass. The train entered a tunnel. Darkness swallowed the windows immediately. For several moments, the carriage reflected only itself back inward, a rows of worn seats, amber lighting, silent faces suspended against black glass. The man studied the reflections unconsciously. Something felt wrong there too, not distorted. Delayed. Passengers blinked a fraction too late. Breathing movements lagged subtly behind. The reflection of rain sledding across the glass continued several seconds longer than the rain itself outside. Then the tunnel ended. Moonlight appeared faintly beyond drifting clouds for the first time all night, illuminating the valley below the tracks, and the man realized they were far higher in the mountains than they should have been. The railway curved along steep cliffs overlooking endless forests swallowed by fog. No roads remained visible below. No towns, no electrical towers. Only dark mountains stretching outward beneath silver rain. He leaned slightly closer toward the window. The valley below contained lights, not modern lights. Lanterns, hundreds of them. They drifted slowly through the forest beneath the mountains like quiet rivers of fire moving between the trees. The young girl across the aisle spoke softly without looking away from the window. "They're early tonight." The man turned toward her instinctively.
"How far does this train go?"
She looked at him then. Her face appeared younger than he first realized.
Perhaps 8 or 9 years old. Rain softened, lantern-light reflected quietly within dark eyes that seemed strangely untouched by surprise.
"Until the track's end." The answer arrived simply, as though obvious. Before he could respond, the train began slowing for the first time since leaving the station. Not abruptly, gradually.
The passengers lifted their heads almost simultaneously.
Outside, another station emerged through the rain. This one was larger.
Old wooden platforms stretched beside multiple tracks disappearing into mist. Dim lanterns hung beneath long sloping roofs while rain-water overflowed from rusted gutters onto empty benches below. No station name appeared anywhere. The train stopped silently. The doors opened.
Cold mist rolled into the carriage immediately.
No one boarded. No one exited. Yet several figures stood motionless on the platform outside. A woman holding a broken umbrella, a teenage boy in a drenched school uniform, an old man carrying flowers wrapped carefully in paper. None moved. They simply watched the train through drifting rain. The man waited for announcements.
Nothing came.
Only the sound of water falling steadily across the station roof. Then slowly, the businessman stood.
He adjusted his loosened tie carefully before stepping into the aisle.
For the first time, another passenger acknowledged him. The elderly woman beside the window looked up quietly. "You arrived sooner than expected." The businessman smiled faintly, not happily, almost apologetically. The roads were empty tonight.
Then he stepped off the train. No goodbye followed. He crossed the rain-covered platform calmly toward the waiting figures beyond the lanterns.
None approached him, yet as he disappeared deeper into the station mist, the people standing there turned slowly and walked beside him into the darkness beyond the tracks.
Together, without speaking.
The train doors closed again. A moment later, it continued moving. The businessman's seat remained empty beneath the dim carriage lights.
No one reacted. Scale narrowed. From the silent station fading behind rain-covered glass to the empty seat beside the aisle to the growing weight settling quietly inside his chest.
The man looked toward the old woman again.
This time her eyes were open.
She watched the darkness outside with the expression of someone recognizing familiar scenery from very far away.
That station, he began carefully. What was that place?
For several seconds she remained silent. Then softly, a place where some passengers remember where they were going.
The train entered another tunnel before he could ask anything further.
Darkness filled the windows once more. This time, however, the reflections inside the carriage had changed. Several seats now appeared occupied in the glass, despite remaining empty in reality. Faint figures sat motionless within the reflections alone, their outlines blurred softly by blackness and passing tunnel lights. The man stared at them instinctively. One reflection turned slowly toward him, not fully, only enough for him to glimpse pale eyes beneath dripping dark hair. Then the tunnel ended. The reflections vanished immediately.
Outside, the world no longer resembled ordinary mountains.
Black water stretched beside the tracks now, perfectly still beneath drifting fog. No shoreline remained visible beyond it. Lanterns floated across the surface in endless scattered patterns extending into darkness too deep to measure. The train continued onward beside the water, and somewhere far ahead in the mist, another station bell rang softly through the night. The train continued deeper into the mountains. Rain drifted steadily across the windows in silver currents, blurring the forests outside into layers of moving darkness.
Occasionally, distant lights appeared between the trees, isolated farmhouses or roadside lamps glowing faintly through fog before vanishing again behind cedar trunks and tunnel walls.
Inside the carriage, no one moved unnecessarily. The overhead lights hummed softly above worn wooden panels darkened by age. Water tapped gently against the roof in uneven rhythms while the train glided onward with impossible smoothness.
The man looked again at his phone.
12:13. Still frozen. No notifications. No signal.
No change. The battery percentage remained exactly where it had been several minutes earlier.
A quiet unease settled deeper inside him now. Not panic. The slow realization that ordinary explanations were beginning to fall away one by one.
Scale shifted. From the endless mountains outside the train windows to the silent passengers beneath dim overhead lights to the unmoving numbers glowing faintly on his phone screen.
Farther down the carriage, the old woman remained perfectly still with her eyes closed.
The businessman near the front window loosened his tie slightly before returning his gaze toward the darkness outside. The elderly couple beside one another had not changed posture once since boarding. Only the young girl holding the paper pinwheel seemed awake in a different way. She watched the rain carefully, not idly, as though searching for something beyond the glass. The train entered a tunnel. Darkness swallowed the windows immediately. For several moments, the carriage reflected only itself back inward of rows of worn seats, amber lighting, silent faces suspended against black glass. The man studied the reflections unconsciously. Something felt wrong there too, not distorted. Delayed. Passengers blinked a fraction too late. Breathing movements lagged subtly behind. The reflection of rain sliding across the glass continued several seconds longer than the rain itself outside. Then the tunnel ended. Moonlight appeared faintly beyond drifting clouds for the first time all night, illuminating the valley below the tracks, and the man realized they were far higher in the mountains than they should have been. The railway curved along steep cliffs overlooking endless forests swallowed by fog. No roads remained visible below. No towns. No electrical towers. Only dark mountains stretching outward beneath silver rain. He leaned slightly closer toward the window. The valley below contained lights, not modern lights. Lanterns. Hundreds of them. They drifted slowly through the forest beneath the mountains like quiet rivers of fire moving between the trees. The young girl across the aisle spoke softly without looking away from the window. "They're early tonight." The man turned toward her instinctively. "How far does this train go?" She looked at him then. Her face appeared younger than he first realized. Perhaps 8 or 9 years old. Rain softened,
The lantern light reflected quietly within dark eyes that seemed strangely untouched by surprise.
Until the track's end, the answer arrived simply, as though obvious. Before he could respond, the train began slowing for the first time since leaving the station, not abruptly, gradually.
The passengers lifted their heads almost simultaneously.
Outside, another station emerged through the rain. This one was larger.
Old wooden platforms stretched beside multiple tracks disappearing into mist. Dim lanterns hung beneath long sloping roofs while rainwater overflowed from rusted gutters onto empty benches below.
No station name appeared anywhere.
The train stopped silently. The doors opened.
Cold mist rolled into the carriage immediately.
No one boarded. No one exited. Yet several figures stood motionless on the platform outside. A woman holding a broken umbrella. A teenage boy in a drenched school uniform. An old man carrying flowers wrapped carefully in paper. None moved. They simply watched the train through drifting rain. The man waited for announcements.
Nothing came.
Only the sound of water falling steadily across the station roof. Then slowly, the businessman stood.
He adjusted his loosened tie carefully before stepping into the aisle.
For the first time, another passenger acknowledged him. The elderly woman beside the window looked up quietly. "You arrived sooner than expected." The businessman smiled faintly, not happily, almost apologetically. The roads were empty tonight.
Then he stepped off the train. No goodbye followed. He crossed the rain-covered platform calmly toward the waiting figures beyond the lanterns.
None approached him, yet as he disappeared deeper into the station mist, the people standing there turned slowly and walked beside him into the darkness beyond the tracks.
Together, without speaking.
The train doors closed again. A moment later, it continued moving. The businessman's seat remained empty beneath the dim carriage lights.
No one reacted. Scale narrowed, from the silent station fading behind rain-covered glass to the empty seat beside the aisle to the growing weight settling quietly inside his chest.
The man looked toward the old woman again.
This time her eyes were open.
She watched the darkness outside with the expression of someone recognizing familiar scenery from very far away.
That station, he began carefully. What was that place?
For several seconds she remained silent. Then softly a place where some passengers remember where they were going.
The train entered another tunnel before he could ask anything further.
Darkness filled the windows once more. This time, however, the reflections inside the carriage had changed. Several seats now appeared occupied in the glass, despite remaining empty in reality. Faint figures sat motionless within the reflections alone, their outlines blurred softly by blackness and passing tunnel lights. The man stared at them instinctively. One reflection turned slowly toward him, not fully, only enough for him to glimpse pale eyes beneath dripping dark hair. Then the tunnel ended. The reflections vanished immediately.
Outside, the world no longer resembled ordinary mountains.
Black water stretched beside the tracks now, perfectly still beneath drifting fog. No shoreline remained visible beyond it. Lanterns floated across the surface in endless scattered patterns extending into darkness too deep to measure. The train continued onward beside the water, and somewhere far ahead in the mist, another station bell rang softly through the night. The next station did not appear immediately. For a long time, the train continued across the flooded plain beneath the colorless sky while lanterns drifted endlessly across the water outside. Some floated alone. Others gathered in clusters like distant villages suspended upon the dark surface. Their reflections trembled softly beneath the mist before dissolving again into blackness. Inside the carriage, silence deepened. Not awkward silence, the kind that settles gradually among people who no longer expect conversation to change anything. The man leaned back against the worn seat and closed his eyes briefly. Fatigue pressed heavily through him now.
Yet it no longer felt connected to the long trip through the mountains or the mist bus or the rain-soaked road that had led him to the station. The exhaustion felt older,
as though something inside him had been tired long before tonight began.
Scale shifted. From the endless lantern-covered water beyond the windows to the dim amber lights inside the carriage to the quiet heaviness settling slowly behind his eyes.
When he opened them again, the old woman sat across from him.
He had not seen her move.
Rainwater still glistened faintly across the edges of her pale cloak.
Her umbrella rested carefully beside her knees, while the train lights reflected softly within tired eyes that seemed fixed somewhere far beyond the carriage walls.
"You boarded very quickly," she said gently.
The statement felt less like accusation than observation. "I didn't think much about it." "No," she replied quietly.
"Most people don't." Outside the windows, fog thickened around the train once more. The lanterns drifting across the water grew fewer now, their glow fading gradually into distance until only darkness remained beyond the glass. The man looked toward the nearly empty carriage. Only 6 passengers remained now, an elderly couple asleep beneath dim lights, a student staring motionlessly out the window, a middle-aged woman holding a wilted bouquet wrapped in wet paper, a man in a railway uniform seated near the front with his cap resting neatly beside him. None acknowledged one another.
"Where are they going?" he asked softly.
The old woman folded her hands together.
"Some already know. And the others?"
This time she hesitated. "They are still remembering." The answer unsettled him more deeply than the others had, because slowly, impossibly slowly, he was beginning to understand what frightened him most about the train. Not where it traveled, what it carried away. The train lights flickered once overhead. For several seconds, darkness moved softly through the carriage before the amber glow steadied again. But something had changed. The windows beside them no longer reflected the passengers inside. Only darkness remained in the glass. No seats,
no lights, no faces.
The train itself had disappeared from the reflection entirely. The man sat upright immediately. Outside the windows, the flooded plain remained hidden beneath fog,
yet the glass reflected nothing at all. The old woman noticed his expression.
"This part of the journey is quieter," she said.
"What happened to the reflections?" Her gaze lowered briefly toward the black windows.
"Sometimes they fade before memory does." The statement lingered heavily between them. The train continued onward through darkness. Then, faintly at first, music drifted through the carriage.
An old station melody, soft, distant,
distorted slightly by static.
The sounds seemed to come from nowhere specific, neither speakers nor adjoining carriages, but from the train itself.
The railway worker near the front lifted his head slowly at the music. For the first time, emotion crossed a passenger's face clearly. Recognition.
He stood carefully from his seat. His uniform looked decades old now, but the man saw it properly faded navy fabric with silver buttons worn dull by time.
Rain stains darkened the sleeves, while an old station insignia rested above the breast pocket.
The railway worker bowed politely toward the carriage.
Then he walked toward the connecting door at the front of the train.
As he reached it, the music stopped.
The door opened silently on its own. Cold white fog drifted inward from the next carriage beyond. The railway worker disappeared into it without hesitation. The door closed again.
No one reacted. Scale narrowed.
From the silent train moving through endless darkness to the closed carriage door beneath dim amber lights to the quiet pulse beginning again inside his throat. The man turned toward the old woman. "Who are these people?" This time her answer came softly enough that he almost missed it beneath the sound of rain against the roof. "Passengers."
"That's not what I mean."
For the first time since boarding, genuine sadness crossed her face.
"Yes," she whispered. "I know."
Silence returned afterward. The train began slowing again. Outside the windows, faint lights appeared through the fog ahead.
Another station.
But this one looked different from the others. No lanterns hung beneath the platform roof. No waiting figures stood in silence beside the tracks. Instead, the station glowed with cold fluorescent light that buzzed softly through drifting mist. Modern vending machines stood against tiled walls. Plastic benches lined the platform. A digital arrival board flickered uncertainly above empty tracks.
Ordinary.
Almost painfully ordinary. The man stared through the glass in confusion.
"This station, it's closer," the old woman said quietly. "Closer to what?"
She looked toward the platform lights trembling faintly beyond the fog.
"The world you remember."
The train stopped. The doors opened.
A cold breeze drifted into the carriage, carrying familiar scents for the first time all night: coffee, wet concrete, electrical wires after rain.
The station looked exactly like countless rural stations across Japan, and yet something about it remained wrong. No advertisements hung on the walls.
No station staff moved behind the ticket windows.
And despite the bright fluorescent lights, the platform itself felt strangely abandoned, like a memory reconstructed from fragments rather than a real place. Then the man noticed the clock above the station sign, 12:13, still unmoving. A voice echoed faintly through distant speakers.
"Not an announcement."
Only static. Then, very softly beneath it, final passengers should prepare to depart. The doors remained open.
Waiting. The doors remained open longer than before. Cold air drifted through the carriage, carrying the smell of rain-soaked concrete and distant electrical smoke.
Beyond the platform, empty streets disappeared into pale fog beneath flickering traffic lights. For the first time since boarding, the world outside resembled somewhere he recognized. Not specifically, but enough. The station could have belonged to any quiet rural town at the edge of the mountains. Vending machines hummed softly beneath fluorescent light. Bicycle racks stood empty beside rain-darkened railings. A convenience store sign glowed faintly through drifting mist farther down the road beyond the tracks.
Ordinary, yet the longer he looked at it, the stranger it became.
No cars moved.
No insects buzzed around the station lights. And despite the rain, nothing reflected properly. The puddles across the platform absorbed light rather than returning it. Scale shifted.
From the nearly familiar station beyond the train doors to the rainwater pooling silently across the platform to the uneasy stillness tightening quietly inside his chest.
"You can leave here if you want."
The old woman's voice broke softly through the silence.
He turned toward her immediately. "What?"
She sat calmly beneath the dim carriage lights, her hands folded neatly around the handle of her closed umbrella. "This station is still near enough to the living world." The statement lingered heavily between them. The man looked again toward the open doors.
"Leave." The idea should have comforted him. Instead, it filled him with hesitation he did not fully understand.
Because somewhere during the journey, something inside him had begun loosening from ordinary reality itself. The train no longer felt entirely separate from him.
Its silence, its drifting movement,
its endless rain and dim lights and sleeping passengers, all of it had begun settling quietly beneath his thoughts like memory returning slowly after years forgotten. What happens if I stay on the train? The old woman lowered her gaze briefly. The same thing that happens to everyone eventually. Not threat, not warning, only certainty. The fluorescent lights outside flickered once violently. For a moment, the station disappeared completely behind darkness.
Then the lights steadied again.
And someone stood on the platform. The man froze. A figure waited beneath the station clock several meters from the train doors. Tall,
motionless, holding a dark umbrella.
Rain drifted softly around them. The face remained hidden beneath shadow and mist, yet something about the posture struck him instantly with impossible familiarity. Recognition moved through him before thought could explain why. The figure lifted one hand slightly, not waving, inviting. The man stood slowly from his seat. The old woman watched him carefully now.
"Do you know them?" she asked.
He opened his mouth to answer, then stopped.
Because he didn't. Not exactly. Yet his body insisted otherwise.
The shape of the shoulders, the way the umbrella tilted slightly against the rain. Even the stillness itself felt remembered somehow. The train remained waiting. The station clock continued displaying 12:13. Outside, the figure beneath the umbrella turned slowly and began walking toward the station exit beyond the fog.
Without thinking, the man stepped into the aisle.
"You shouldn't follow too quickly," the old woman said softly behind him. He paused beside the open doors.
"Who are they?"
This time, sadness deepened visibly across her face. "Someone your memory has not finished carrying." Rain touched his skin the moment he stepped onto the platform.
Cold. Real.
The station beneath his feet felt solid after the strange drifting silence of the train.
Water pooled along cracked yellow safety lines while fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with weak electrical hums.
Ahead, the umbrella figure continued moving slowly toward the fog-covered station exit. The man followed.
His footsteps echoed softly through the empty platform.
Behind him, the train doors remained open.
Waiting.
The farther he walked from the carriage, the more normal the station appeared.
Posters decorated the walls again.
Train schedules hung beside ticket machines. The distant convenience store sign blinked weakly through rain, yet subtle wrongness remained everywhere. Every advertisement displayed faded blank spaces where faces should have been. Train maps listed stations with no names, and the clocks, every clock showed 12:13.
Scale narrowed. From the rain-covered station lost within fog to the dark umbrella moving ahead through fluorescent light to the faint ache beginning quietly beneath his ribs. The figure stopped near the exit stairs leading down toward the road. For several seconds, they remained motionless with their backs still turned toward him. Rainwater dripped steadily from the umbrella edges onto the concrete below. Then softly or late, the voice struck him like cold water. Not because he recognized it fully.
Because part of him almost did.
The figure turned slightly.
Still not enough for him to clearly see the face beneath shadow and rain. Only pale skin, dark hair dampened by mist, eyes reflecting station light too softly.
"I know you," the man whispered.
The figure studied him silently for several seconds.
"Then no."
"You only remember the feeling of losing me." The words hollowed something inside him instantly. Memory moved faintly at the edges of thought. Hospital lights, a ringing phone, rain against apartment windows, someone walking away through crowds he could no longer fully picture, but every image dissolved before becoming complete. The figure stepped backward toward the descending station stairs. "You shouldn't stay here too long," they said quietly. The fluorescent lights flickered again. This time the station around them dimmed dramatically. The convenience store sign outside vanished. The advertisements blurred into pale, empty paper. The distant road beyond the station dissolved into fog, and somewhere behind him, the train whistle sounded softly through the rain. The figure beneath the umbrella looked toward the sound.
"He's waiting for you." "Who?"
But before the figure could answer, the station lights failed completely. Darkness swallowed the platform. Only the train windows behind him continued glowing faintly through the fog like distant lanterns beneath deep water. Then, from somewhere within the darkness beyond the stairs, many footsteps began slowly ascending toward the station. The footsteps rose slowly through the darkness below the station.
Not hurried, measured, wet shoes striking concrete stairs one after another beneath the sound of falling rain.
The man stepped backward instinctively. The platform lights remained dead overhead. Only the distant glow from the train windows illuminated the station now, their warm amber reflections trembling softly across rainwater pooled along the concrete. The figure beneath the umbrella stood motionless beside the stairwell. No fear appeared in their expression, only quiet resignation. "They're arriving early tonight," they whispered.
Another set of footsteps joined the first, then another.
Many people were climbing toward the station through the darkness below, yet no voices accompanied them, no conversation,
no breathing,
only the steady rhythm of shoes against wet stairs.
Scale shifted.
From the silent station swallowed by blackout to the stairwell descending into unseen darkness, to the cold rain gathering slowly against the back of his neck. The train whistle sounded again behind him.
Longer this time.
The sound moved through the fog-covered station with strange softness, almost mournful beneath the rain. The figure holding the umbrella looked toward the glowing train windows.
"You should go back now."
The man stared toward the stairwell. Shapes were beginning to emerge below, pale outlines moving slowly upward through darkness.
How do you know what's down there?
For the first time, emotion crossed the figure's face clearly. Not terror, recognition. Because I waited here once, too.
The answer struck him harder than he expected. Before he could speak again, the first figure reached the top of the stairs.
An elderly man in a drenched business suit stepped silently onto the platform. Rainwater dripped steadily from his sleeves, while fog curled softly around polished black shoes darkened with moisture.
His eyes remained unfocused.
Not blind.
Distant. He walked past them without acknowledgement and continued calmly toward the waiting train.
Another figure emerged behind him.
Then another.
A nurse still wearing hospital shoes. A teenage boy carrying a broken bicycle helmet. A woman holding wilted lilies against her chest. All soaked by rain. All silent.
None reacted to one another.
They simply crossed the platform slowly toward the train doors glowing faintly through the darkness.
The man felt something inside him tighten painfully as he watched them pass.
Not fear, recognition, not of faces,
of exhaustion. Every passenger carried the same quiet heaviness within their movements as though each had been traveling for far longer than tonight alone.
The train doors remained open for them, waiting patiently. The old woman still sat visible through the nearest carriage window, her calm silhouette softened by warm amber light. She watched the platform silently. The figure beneath the umbrella stepped farther back toward the stairwell. Rain blurred parts of their face now beneath drifting mist. "You won't remember me much longer," they said softly.
The statement hollowed him instantly. What do you mean? But even as he asked, something frightening became clear.
The face beneath the umbrella was already becoming harder to hold in focus. Not physically disappearing, loosening. Details slipping gently from memory moments after seeing them.
Hair color, voice,
the exact shape of the eyes.
The realization frightened him more deeply than the train itself. Scale narrowed, from the endless rain falling across the empty station to the blurred figure beneath the umbrella to the growing panic moving quietly beneath his ribs. Wait. He stepped closer instinctively.
The figure shook their head slowly. "You're not supposed to stay here."
"Who are you?"
Silence lingered between them. Then softly someone you almost followed. The station lights flickered weakly overhead. For one brief instant, fluorescent light flooded the platform again, and in that instant, the man saw blood staining the side of the umbrella figure's coat. Dark rainwater mixed with it across pale fabric. The lights died again immediately afterward,
but the image remained burned into him.
Hospital lights flashed somewhere deep within memory. Rain against a windshield, the violent sound of twisting metal.
Then nothing. The train whistle sounded a third time.
Long and low through the fog. Final. The passengers ascending from the stairwell continued boarding silently now.
Some carried flowers.
Others carried nothing at all.
A few appeared confused, glancing around the station as though uncertain how they arrived there.
Yet all eventually drifted toward the train doors.
The umbrella figure looked toward the carriage one last time. "You still have time to leave." The statement felt different now. Urgent.
The man turned toward the train.
Warm light glowed softly from within the windows while rain drifted endlessly across the tracks beyond.
For the first time since boarding, he noticed something strange about the rails themselves. They did not continue beyond the station. The tracks disappeared into fog only several meters ahead of the platform, as though the railways simply ended within darkness itself.
Yet the train had arrived from that direction,
and somehow would continue traveling there again.
A sudden metallic announcement crackled faintly through hidden speakers overhead.
The voice sounded distorted beyond recognition. Final departure approaching. The umbrella figure stepped backward toward the dark stairwell. Mist drifted heavily around them now. "You need to decide before the doors close." The man stared at them helplessly.
"Will I see you again?"
The figure smiled faintly, not happily, almost gently.
"You already did."
Then the station lights returned completely. Fluorescent glow flooded the platform once more.
The stairwell stood empty.
No umbrella figure remained there, only rain falling softly into darkness below. The man stood frozen beside the platform edge while the train doors began closing slowly behind him. Inside the carriage, the old woman watched him carefully through fog-covered glass, and far beyond the station, somewhere deeper within the endless darkness beyond the tracks, another whistle echoed softly through the rain. The doors closed with almost no sound. Warm amber light sealed itself behind fobbed windows as the train began moving once more through the rain-covered darkness beyond the station. For several seconds the man remained standing motionless on the platform. Cold rain soaked steadily through his coat while fluorescent lights buzzed weakly overhead.
The empty stairwell descended silently into shadow beside him, carrying no trace of the figure who had stood there moments earlier.
Only the words remained.
"You already did."
The meaning drifted somewhere just beyond understanding. Memory pressed faintly at the edges of thought, rain against glass. A hand reaching across a passenger seat, headlights appearing too suddenly through darkness. Then nothing again. The station around him flickered softly. The vending machines dimmed.
The fluorescent lights buzzed unevenly overhead.
The advertisements along the walls blurred slowly at the edges as though the rain itself were washing details away from reality. And beyond the moving train, the tracks ended, not vanished into distance.
Ended.
The rails extended only several meters beyond the station before dissolving directly into black water hidden beneath drifting fog. Yet the train continued traveling there anyway.
Its wheels made no sound.
Its lantern-lit windows moved steadily outward across the darkness beyond the broken tracks.
Scale shifted.
From the impossible railway disappearing into water, to the dimly glowing train drifting farther through fog, to the slow hollow feeling opening quietly inside his chest.
The station loudspeaker crackled again.
Static drifted through the rain before a faint distorted voice emerged. Remaining passengers should board immediately.
The fluorescent lights dimmed further. The station itself was fading. He realized that suddenly, not emotionally, but physically.
The tiled walls appeared less solid than before. The station map near the ticket gate had blurred into pale, meaningless lines. Even the road beyond the entrance no longer looked fully real beneath the fog, as though the station only existed while the train remained near it.
The train whistle echoed again across the water.
Farther away now. The man looked toward the disappearing carriages,
then toward the stairwell,
then back again. And despite everything, despite fear, confusion, exhaustion, the impossible darkness waiting beyond the broken tracks, he stepped forward. The platform beneath his feet trembled softly.
He broke into a run. Rainwater splashed upward around his shoes while the station lights flickered violently overhead.
Fog drifted thickly across the tracks beyond the platform edge, swallowing the rear half of the train almost completely now.
The final carriage moved slowly past. He reached for the nearest handrail.
Cold metal met his fingers, and with one desperate motion, he pulled himself aboard. The doors closed immediately behind him.
The station vanished, not gradually.
One moment fluorescent lights still glowed faintly through rain-covered glass, and the next, only black water remained outside the windows. The train interior had changed. The amber lights burned lower now, casting long shadows across the carriage walls. Several seats sat empty where passengers had remained earlier. Only 4 people were left.
The old woman, the elderly couple,
the middle-aged woman still holding wilted flowers,
and him. No one reacted to his return.
The old woman simply watched the darkness beyond the windows quietly before speaking.
"You almost stayed."
The man steadied his breathing slowly. "What happens to people who do?" The old woman folded her hands together. They begin forgetting which side they belong to.
Outside the windows, the world no longer resembled land at all.
The train traveled across narrow rails suspended above endless black water stretching beneath fog in every direction. No mountains remained visible.
No sky.
only drifting pale mist and distant lanterns scattered across the darkness like floating stars. And beneath the water shapes moved, large,
slow,
almost impossible to distinguish clearly beneath the black surface. The man stared instinctively. At first they resembled shadows distorted by rain and fog. Then one passed directly beneath the tracks.
Human figures,
dozens of them, not swimming, drifting. Pale forms suspended beneath the water with closed eyes and loose clothing moving softly in unseen currents below the train. The man recoiled from the window immediately. The old woman's expression did not change.
Try not to look down for too long. His voice came quieter now.
What is this place? For several moments only rain answered him.
Then softly the crossing.
The words settled through the carriage like distant bells. The train lights flickered again. This time, the windows reflected the passengers once more.
But the reflections were wrong.
The old woman's reflection appeared much younger.
The elderly couple reflected as children sitting side by side. The woman holding flowers appeared dressed in a hospital gown stained faintly with blood.
And his own reflection stood on a rain-covered road beside crushed headlights and broken glass.
Scale narrowed.
From the endless flooded darkness beyond the tracks, to the distorted reflections trembling in the carriage windows, to the sudden violent rhythm of his own heartbeat.
He turned away immediately.
The reflection remained burned into his thoughts anyway. The old woman watched him carefully now.
You're beginning to remember faster than most.
The train entered fog thicker than before. The world outside disappeared completely. Only the rails remained visible ahead, two narrow lines suspended above endless black water vanishing directly into white emptiness. Then, very faintly through the mist ahead, bells began ringing somewhere beyond the darkness.
Soft, ancient,
and impossibly far below them, the bells continued ringing beneath the water. Soft at first, so distant they almost blended with the sound of rain striking the carriage roof. Yet as the train moved deeper into the fog, the tones grew clear, slow bronze echoes rising upward from somewhere far below the flooded darkness surrounding the tracks. The passengers remaining inside the carriage reacted quietly. The elderly couple opened their eyes together. The woman holding wilted flowers lowered her gaze toward her lap. Even the old woman beside the window seemed to listen carefully now, her expression softened by recognition rather than surprise. Only the man felt fear, not sharp panic, something heavier.
The instinctive understanding that the bells belonged to a place no living person should hear. Scale shifted, from the endless white fog swallowing the tracks ahead to the dim amber carriage, drifting silently above black water, to the low trembling sound rising quietly through his chest.
The train slowed. Outside the windows, faint structures emerged gradually through the mist.
At first he mistook them for trees, then pillars,
then entire buildings. A city stood beneath the water, not fully submerged, half lost.
Dark rooftops rose from the black surface, while ancient wooden walkways stretched between lantern-lit structures disappearing into drifting fog.
Temple bells hung from towers tilted slightly beneath the weight of endless rain and age. No movement appeared there, no living light, only stillness. The train crossed directly above the drowned city along narrow elevated tracks suspended over silent canals and flooded streets below.
The bells rang again, closer now.
The woman holding flowers suddenly stood from her seat.
For the first time since boarding, she spoke.
My son hated the rain. Her voice sounded fragile, as though unused for many years.
No one answered. She held the wilted flowers carefully against her chest while staring toward the drowned city outside the windows. When he was small, he used to cry whenever storms came at night.
The old woman watched her quietly. The train continued slowing. Far ahead through the fog, another station emerged. This one rested directly above the flooded city itself. Lanterns hung from ancient wooden beams while black water moved silently beneath narrow platforms supported by old pillars disappearing into darkness below. Temple bells surrounded the station from every direction, some enormous, some cracked with age, all ringing softly through the fog. The train stopped. The doors opened. Cold mist rolled slowly into the carriage, carrying the scent of wet wood, incense, and deep unmoving water. The woman holding flowers stepped into the aisle.
The old woman spoke gently without looking toward her. He remembered him sooner this time.
The woman smiled faintly. Tears gathered in her eyes, though her expression remained peaceful.
He waited longer than I deserved. Then she stepped off the train.
The man watched her walk slowly across the lantern-lit platform toward the drowned city beyond. And there, waiting beneath one of the hanging temple bells, stood a young boy holding a yellow umbrella.
Rain fell softly around him.
The woman stopped several steps away.
Neither moved immediately. Neither spoke.
Then the boy smiled.
Small, warm, real.
The woman covered her mouth as though trying not to break apart completely. The flowers slipped gently from her hands onto the wet wooden platform. The boy reached toward her, and together they disappeared slowly into the fog-filled streets beyond the station.
The bells continued ringing afterward, softly, patiently.
The doors closed again. Only 3 passengers remained now.
Scale narrowed.
From the drowned city buried beneath endless rain to the empty seat beside the carriage window to the aching stillness settling quietly inside him, the train moved onward. This time the old woman changed seats.
She sat beside him now. For several minutes neither spoke.
Outside the windows, the drowned city drifted slowly past beneath lantern light and fog.
Narrow canals reflected pale glowing bells while empty bridges disappeared into mist between rooftops darkened by rain and age. Then quietly, she asked, "What do you remember?"
The question frightened him more than the bells had, because something inside him already knew the answer. Not fully, but enough. Headlights cutting across rain, a mountain road, the violent sound of twisting metal, and someone beside him. Someone laughing softly moments before impact.
He closed his eyes briefly.
The memory dissolved again before becoming complete.
"I don't know," he whispered.
The old woman studied the flooded city outside the windows.
"Most people don't at first."
The train lights dimmed lower. Beyond the drowned city, the fog thickened once more until only lantern light remained visible through the glass. The bells beneath the water continued ringing steadily now, almost like distant breathing beneath the tracks themselves. The man looked toward the old woman carefully. "Who are you?" For several seconds she remained silent.
Then softly, "A passenger who stayed too long between stations."
The answer settled heavily into the dim carriage. Before he could ask more, the train entered darkness again. Not tunnel darkness. Something deeper. The lantern-lit city vanished behind black fog so dense the windows no longer reflected anything at all. The bells stopped ringing, and somewhere far ahead within the unseen darkness beyond the tracks, another train whistle answered softly through the rain. The whistle faded slowly into darkness. For several moments afterward, nothing remained beyond the windows except black fog moving softly beside the train. No lanterns, no drowned city,
no reflection within the glass.
Only endless darkness drifting quietly alongside the carriage as the train continued forward upon tracks the man could no longer see. Inside, silence deepened once more. Only 2 passengers remained now. The elderly couple had disappeared sometime during the darkness beyond the bells. Their seats stood empty beneath dim amber lights, rainwater still glistening faintly along the window beside them. Only the old woman sat near him now.
Her pale umbrella rested across her knees while the carriage lights flickered softly overhead.
The man no longer asked where the train was going.
Somewhere during the journey, the question itself had stopped mattering. Scales shifted.
From the endless darkness surrounding the train to the nearly empty carriage beneath amber light to the quiet rhythm of breaths settling slowly inside his chest. Outside, faint light eventually emerged through the fog ahead. Not station lights. Dawn, pale gray morning spread gradually across the darkness beyond the windows until the outline of water became visible once more beneath drifting mist. Then the tracks ended. truly ended. Ahead of the train, the rails stretched only several meters farther before stopping at the edge of an immense black lake disappearing into fog beyond sight. No station waited there, no platform, only still water beneath, the pale beginning of morning. Yet the train continued rolling forward slowly toward the broken edge of the tracks.
The man stood immediately.
What happens now? The old woman looked toward the dawnlit water. The same thing that always happens. The train slowed gently, not stopping completely.
Waiting.
The fog outside thinned enough for him to see something standing beside the water ahead. A single wooden pier extended outward into the black lake, and at the end of it, someone waited beneath a dark umbrella.
The shape struck him instantly with painful familiarity.
Rain no longer fell here. Only pale mist drifted softly across the lake beneath the first colorless light of dawn. The figure beneath the umbrella remained motionless.
Waiting.
Memory returned all at once. The mountain road.
The storm.
Headlights sliding suddenly across wet pavement. The violent sound of impact. And beside him, her, laughing softly moments earlier because the rain had become too heavy to see through properly. The breath left him completely.
Scale narrowed.
From the endless black lake beyond the broken tracks, to the lone figure waiting at the end of the pier, to the unbearable ache opening quietly inside his chest.
She died, he whispered.
The old woman nodded gently.
And you almost followed.
The train doors opened.
Cold dawn mist drifted softly into the carriage.
The figure at the end of the pier remained waiting beneath the umbrella, face still hidden by distance and pale morning fog. The man stepped toward the open doors slowly.
Not out of fear now, out of understanding.
The old woman watched him carefully. If you walk to the end of the pier, she said quietly, the train will leave without you.
He looked toward the waiting figure again. Part of him wanted nothing more than to follow, to finally reach the person memory had been trying desperately to recover throughout the journey.
But now, standing within the pale quiet of approaching dawn, another realization settled softly into him.
The train had never been carrying him toward death alone. It had been carrying him toward the choice to remain there.
The fog drifted slowly across the lake. The figure beneath the umbrella waited patiently at the end of the pier. Then, very gently, she lowered the umbrella and smiled, not calling him forward, not asking him to stay, only smiling with the same quiet warmth he remembered from before the rain and twisted metal and shattered headlights.
A goodbye.
Not an invitation. Tears blurred his vision immediately. The old woman lowered her gaze beside him. Most people only understand at the final station.
The whistle sounded once more through the pale morning fog. Soft,
lonely,
distant.
The man stepped backward from the open doors. The train began moving again almost immediately. Slowly at first, then farther along unseen tracks hidden beneath mist and dawnlight. The figure beside the lake grew smaller gradually.
Yet even as distance swallowed the pier and black water alike, he could still see her standing there peacefully beneath the soft grey morning.
Until finally the fog carried her away completely. The man sat quietly beside the window afterward. Outside, ordinary mountains slowly returned through drifting mist.
Telephone poles,
road crossings, small rivers moving beside forested slopes.
Morning had fully arrived.
The old woman beside him closed her eyes softly beneath the warm amber lights, and for the first time since boarding the train, the clock inside his coat pocket changed. 12:14. 1 minute later, the train continued onward through the waking mountains of Japan while rain clouds slowly broke apart above the trees, and somewhere far behind him, hidden beyond fog and black water and drowned stations beneath the earth, the bells beneath the darkness continued ringing softly for passengers still traveling through the night.